What is harder, starting a process to transform an organisational culture or sustaining a good organisational culture once you have a reputation for having got it right? Timpson is a renowned British retail service provider who have been a family business since 1865. The company offers shoe repairs, key cutting, watch repairs, and are the mainstay of many high streets. They're also celebrated for their unique approach to employee welfare, offering benefits such as free holiday homes and a focus on hiring ex-offenders. But how do they sustain these efforts, and what can we learn from their approach? So let's find out. Welcome to In Good Company, Will Lankston. Nice to have you here. How are you today?
Yeah, really well. Thanks, Dan. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here, and let's give our audience the opportunity to get to know you a little bit more and we'll ask you our first question, which we ask all of our guests, which is to tell us about yourself in 60 seconds.
Yeah, so my name's Will Lankston. I have been with the Timpson Group for just under 15 years now. I started off working in the business in the Timpson shop in Market Square in Aylesbury. And I've been lucky enough, I suppose, to work in all of the different businesses that make up our group now.
Right.
So that's the Timpson business, the Max Spielman business, the Snappy Snaps business, our Johnson's business, our Jeeves business. I also set up a bar on the island of Anglesey and called it Will's Bar, so I wouldn't forget where it was.
Nice.
So I've had a really interesting career with the business, and my latest job is, I suppose the easiest way to describe it is that I look after all of our non-shop businesses, the biggest
Right.
of those being our vending business. We've got a lot of ID passport photo booths, self-service key cutting machines, and self-service photo printing kiosks. We've got about 3,000 of those around the UK and Ireland. And I also look after our web teams, buying teams, our locksmiths business, and a few other bits in between.
Yeah, well, it's such a huge wealth of experience then throughout the group that we can draw on today, and it's amazing to hear kind of how widespread the Timpson name is now as it's been running since 1865. I mean, Ivan, I didn't know until obviously the research for today's episode that how big the Timpson group actually is, and it sounds like you've worked across virtually all of it. So yeah, I'm really excited to dive into a bit more info about that today. So yeah, we've invited you to kind of talk about organizational culture, and as I mentioned before, Timpson's been a family business since 1865. So maybe if I can, we'll delve straight into kind of the role of purpose, because I think it's probably fair to say that you don't kind of get to where Timpson has now without purpose kind of being at the forefront. But would you agree with that statement? Do you think purpose is important?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we're a bit of so there's a couple of things I'd pick up on there. You mentioned that you probably didn't know about the scale of our business up until doing the research today. That's something that I hear all the time.
Right.
We as a business are not great at actually telling our customers and prospective customers about all of the different things that we do, because historically we've avoided doing kind of traditional marketing, and we've just relied upon our sort of mantra, which is offer great service to our customers and word of mouth will look after the marketing for us. But we are now starting to sort of dip our toe and do a bit more marketing, just because we recognize that we do so many different things. We offer so many different services across the different brands that actually, it's important that we start to communicate all of those different things to our customers a bit more effectively, I think. But then the second piece, and I guess the more important question around purpose, we're not a business that does, sort of spends lots of time sitting around the boardroom table talking about mission statements and, purpose and value. But it is, I believe that the reason that we've been as successful as we are is that we've been very lucky to have been led by a purpose-driven family, and primarily in John Timpson, our chairman, and James, his son, our quite recently former chief executive, before he went on to take up his new role in government. And the values of the family are clear in everything that we do within the business. So I think if you were to talk about the kind of the purpose of our business at the core, we want to treat all of our colleagues and customers with the values of trust and kindness. And so, that really is the way that we operate the business on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I mean, it's we talked about the. I mean, in terms of, we'll get into some of the recruitment and the way that Timpson's worked throughout the years. In terms of the overall operation and the running of the business, in terms of from an employee point of view, we had a quick look at the website. We had a look at the website in whilst we were kind of preparing for this episode again, and one thing that stuck out to us was upside down management, that term. And I know that, again, the culture is very important to Timpson. So first of all, what does upside down management actually look like in practice?
Yeah, so in really simple terms, upside down management is really just saying that the people that serve our customers in our shops are the most important people within our business. They are the kings and queens. And everybody else within the business, myself included, our primary task is to make sure that those colleagues feel supported. So really, put simply, we look to recruit really great personalities, and then we, let them get on in their role without creating lots of rules that often get in the way of them being able to do their job. We're just there to support them and remove barriers to them being able to do an excellent job.
Yeah, and one thing that, again, we mentioned in the intro, and a key part of it, is employing ex-offenders, and I mean, there's not many employers that would almost support that group of people. Yet, from what I can gather, saying that from what you're saying, like, if they have the right personality, and I would assume, live by or work by a certain set of rules or guidelines, that they can find work within the Timpson group, regardless of their background or what they, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few things to pick up on there. Interesting when you say that there aren't many businesses like us. We always go sort of come back to the fact that every business recruits colleagues with convictions or previous convictions. Lots of them just don't know they're doing it. So the
Okay.
only difference really with us is that, because a criminal conviction is not a barrier to employment within our business, our colleagues and prospective colleagues feel more comfortable telling us about their past.
Right.
But this all came about from James Timpson visiting a prison. Yeah, it must be almost 20 years ago now. He was invited to go and do a visit. The chap showing him around the prison was an inmate of that prison, and James really, really liked him, got on with him really well. And when he sort of got to the end of the visit, he shyly slipped him his business card and said, look, when you get out, if you're looking for a job, give me a call, which he did. And he still works for us as one of our great managers in the Northwest region. And after that experience, James realized that there was this huge pool of people within
Yeah.
prison, many of whom had just made a simple mistake. Lots of them had made one-off mistakes. Many of them had really had very challenging backgrounds, and had found it really difficult to get into work, and that may have driven them to offend. And he realised that basically no one would touch them with a barge pole. No employer was interested in speaking to these people and potentially offering them jobs. And so he realised that there was a massive pool of talent within prison, that we could talk to and look to offer employment. And people, I think, believe that this is a wholly philanthropic mission. And don't get me wrong, it absolutely, we do feel that it is the right thing to do to give people a second chance, but it also makes really good commercial sense. I suppose the challenging thing now is that lots of other businesses, great businesses like Greggs and Cook, are also doing a lot of work with recruiting people from within prison. And so the challenge we face now really is is not necessarily, the barriers, I suppose, to working with the prison system that perhaps previously have existed. Now it's more, we turn up to do a recruitment day, and Greg's have been there the day before, and they've got all the really great people. So the way to look at it for us is it is just another recruitment stream within our business, and it is used really, really commonly and to great effect by our area teams up and down the country, all led by Darren Burns, who looks after our foundation.
Yeah, I mean, it is fascinating. I think the thing that obviously stands out, and I have to say, I didn't know that Greg's recruited in the same way either, or as part of their recruitment. But I think what's refreshing is about that, and this goes back to what you were saying about the word of mouth, because it's been well known that that Timpson does recruit ex-offenders, and it's been known not necessarily through marketing, but as I look at your website now, it is talked about. But there's that. I really like that openness and that dialogue of going, this is something that we do. And we're proud of it, because as you say, there are so many people within the system that may have made simple mistakes. Doesn't necessarily mean that their personalities are bad, or they're not able to change their ways or work and make a good life for themselves. And so they need those opportunities. And so to be provided that by places like Timpson, I think is something quite special, and it's a very human thing to do. And I think that is so important, especially now, as I think that's really something to be proud of, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But again, it makes sense for the business. We've got some amazing colleagues that we've been lucky enough to recruit from prison, and it works for those people who perhaps were not offered a second chance previously. But it also works for society. At the end of the day, the impact that someone having a job has on reoffending rates is enormous. And so by getting these people who are leaving prison into employment as quickly as possible after they leave the prison system, that's having a really positive impact on society as a whole. So we really do see this as a win-win-win. We win because we get some great people. Our colleagues who have left prison win because they're offered stable employment and the opportunity to progress within a career, and society wins because these people are far less likely to reoffend if they're in a permanent and stable job.
Yeah. And to go back to the upside down management piece just briefly, and with what we've talked about in mind, I remember seeing an interview where it was quoted that if a store manager wanted to change something within the shop, there was this the opportunity, or I would imagine this could come from anywhere within that branch, that they would have the flexibility and to be able to make certain changes without having to go through a hierarchical process to and kind of impact are well known for saying that leadership kind of should and can come from anywhere within an organization. It sounds like that approach is used regularly within Timpson. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. We only have two rules really within our business. That's put the money in the till and act the part. Turn up on time, be nice to people, wear the uniform, all of those sort of common sense things that 95% of people can do. Outside of that, do what you want. Do whatever you think is best to serve the customers in your shop. We're not going to tell you how to do that. Now, look, that comes with some interesting quirks. We've always used the example: if you want to paint your shop pink, go for it. Well, the branch manager of our Max Spielman shop in Faversham decided to do just that. I'd encourage you to Google it. There is a pink Max Spielman shop on the high street. And lots of businesses, they think we're a bit bonkers, particularly when we encourage our colleagues to, if they have one of their customers have a problem, rather than have to ask for permission to resolve that, we encourage them to use up to £1,000 to solve that complaint here and now. Because we recognise that we're far more likely to send that customer away happy if their complaint
Mm.
is dealt with on the spot. And we trust our colleagues to make that decision and make that judgment themselves. They were there. They're far more likely to have a view as to how best to resolve that situation than
Yeah.
someone sat in an office at Timpson House, 250 miles away in Wythenshawe.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it comes back to that point around, employ great personalities and trust them to get on with the job.
Yeah. And I think that element of trust, I mean, we've talked about that in previous episodes. It's so crucial to organizations, no matter where you sit within that organization. And yeah, like I just to pick up again, you've mentioned personalities there, which is so key. And I know that that there are a lot of employers that do recruit based on personality. In terms of training, then, if it's a personality approach first and not necessarily on qualifications or experience, how important would you feel that it is to invest in the training for people skills as well as practical skills for one of their roles?
Yeah. So on that point around it, is it purely based on personality and not qualifications? Yeah, I think it's worth me clarifying that. So clearly we do
Mm.
have some roles, mainly in our support functions. So, in our web teams, our IT teams, our finance teams, where we are looking for some previous experience and
Yeah.
qualifications to really help them kind of hit the ground running when they start in one of those roles. But for the vast majority of jobs within our business, and most of those will be branch-based roles or field-based roles. We are genuinely recruiting on personality and personality alone. The only thing
Yeah.
I'd really be interested in on a CV is your name, phone number, and email address, just so we can make contact with you. Outside of that, let's sit down over a cup of coffee and have a chat. Let's learn about you and what you've done in your life. But really, we're just looking for people who can engage, who can have a conversation. We like people who are quirky,
Mm.
who aren't just sort of necessarily considered normal. And that's why we've got a really wonderful and very diverse group of individuals working in our business.
Yeah, I can imagine. And going back to the training, then, I mean, in terms of the importance of investing in training, I mean, is that something that you do, or is it something you're looking to do in the future, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So training's a huge part of what we do, kind of just by the very nature of the fact that we recruit people without any qualifications. And there aren't a huge amount of people who come to us with previous qualifications in shoe
Mm.
repairs, key cutting, or watch
Yeah, yeah,
repairs. And actually, to be quite honest, we prefer for people not to have any previous experience because often they've kind of picked up some bad habits.
yeah.
So we'd much rather sort of try and find an individual off the street who has no experience, and then train them, give them all of the skills that they need to do the job. And it's quite a lengthy process. So
Mm.
in our Timpson business, from sort of day one that a colleague starts, it takes about 16 weeks for them to become what we would consider to be sort of commercially proficient in offering most of our services. So that, if, say, their branch manager was ill for the day, they'd be okay covering the shop and looking after things. And then it takes, up to a full year to get that individual to a place where they could really go and run their own shop and be, kind of an expert in all of the different services that we offer. So yeah, we have a sizable training team. Every single area in our business, sort of mini region, which is normally made up of about 50 shops. They have a team of colleagues who also help and support with training.
Hmm.
And that is, our training program is constantly under development, and
Mm.
all forms or sort of slots into what we call the kind of Timpson degree,
Right.
which really is broken down into the sort of skills that you need to do the job, and then kind of cross group experience. So getting
Hmm.
experience within our different brands. But then probably the most important pillar is that cultural pillar and having a really good understanding of, how we treat people, how the organization works, and how we lead within our business. Because it's quite difficult training incredible leaders. I think that's something that we would all agree on. But being a leader in our business is really difficult because you're not allowed to tell people what to do. And lots of people struggle with that. So, it's all about supporting people and, really bringing them along with you. And that's a far more difficult leadership style than commanding people, and telling them exactly what they should do and when.
Yeah, well, it feels like an opportunity to do a shameless plug there, but I will hold back to because of the work that, of course, Impact do. But yeah, because we're not here to talk about that necessarily. But the one thing I wanted to ask you about is that with the amount of training and support that you give people who join Timpson and the Timpson group, do you find that because I know that for a lot of organizations, particularly at the moment, talent retention is a big issue. And do you find that you have that same issue, or is it because of the nature of the training that you provide and offer, and also, of course, because of the nature of the backgrounds of people that you do employ? Do you find that retention is a problem, or as much of a problem, or do you have people that have worked there for decades or and so on? How is retention working out for you?
Yeah, so if you were to compare us against most sort of traditional retailers, I mean, we consider ourselves to be a service retailer. But if you were to compare us against most traditional retailers, our retention is far superior. And there's a few reasons for that. One, because we sort of offer all of this on the job training. That's really important. Two, because I think of the suite of benefits that we offer our colleagues. Three, because of the values and the culture of the business. When you combine those things together, I do believe we've got we create quite a number of compelling reasons for our colleagues to stay. We could always do better, and it is always a priority for us to do better. But when we kind of talk about the main challenges that we're facing, colleague retention really is not one of them. And I think that puts us in quite a unique position. Don't get me wrong, we definitely see challenging pockets around the country, and they move, but it's always quite challenging. Kind of northeast Scotland is always a bit of a challenge. London and the southeast can be tricky, but at the moment, I have to say that we're in a pretty good place.
And have you got any sort of success stories where people have started in with no experience, started in a branch, and then have gradually worked their way through the ranks and now, or store manager or even regional manager or anything like that? Do you have any success stories that?
Yeah. So pretty much every single colleague in a senior leadership position within our business started in a shop. Myself included. So when I sit down and look around our board table, every single colleague, bar one, our FD, started life in the business working in a shop, and have all worked their way through from branch colleague to branch manager to mobile manager to area development manager, area manager, regional director, and then become a retail director of their brand. So we really like to promote from within. It's one of our kind of really important core values, because we are a weird, quirky business, and it does take some time to get an understanding of how we do things. But yes, I think just the fact that you look around that board table and pretty much every single one of us, so Sue, who runs the Max shops, Anne, who runs the Snappy shops, Brent, who runs the Johnson's dry cleaning business, Sid, who runs Timpson, and myself, we've all started life in a branch. Sid, I think, started life in a branch when he was about 12 years old.
Really?
And was also our youngest area manager ever, still in his 20s when he took on that job.
I mean, there's definitely something to be said for that, and that just doesn't happen. Like that's obviously care and compassion that's for their employees that allow for that to happen. And I would imagine also because of the opportunity to kind of be yourself in the workplace. I mean, you mentioned about there's some quirky people that work for Timpson, want people wanting to paint the outside of a store pink. But which kind of brought us to talk about. We actually did a survey. I think it was last year now, where we surveyed. Research was done with over 500 global CEOs and senior executives, and it was kind of interesting to hear that only 25% said their organisation actually encourages people to be themselves in the workplace. And so, what do you think is the secret then, if you were to put it down to it, of Timpson's success to allow that to happen?
Again, I think it comes back to that trusting people to get on with the job. So because we're not trying to sort of put people into boxes all the time and telling people do this a certain way, do that a certain way, we're trusting people to do their job the way that they think is best, and serve the customer the way that they think is best. So naturally that allows their personality to shine through, and that's something that we celebrate and encourage, and results in us having some wonderful things happening in shops, like colleagues looking after customers' pets when they go on holiday, and people growing chilies, growing chilies for their customers, and so all sorts of quite lovely stories happening in our shops. And again, it fits within this kind of this framework, I suppose, which is we trust people to get on with the job. We treat all of our colleagues and customers with trust and kindness, and removing those barriers and getting rid of those rules means some really exciting, entertaining things go on. And when you combine that with it's not a rule, but it is in every single one of our job descriptions, which is we ask all of our colleagues to complete a random act of kindness for another colleague or a customer every single day. I think we have a happy place to work, is the easiest way of putting it. And if you'd be interested, I'd be happy to talk a little bit about how we measure that.
Well, yeah, feel free, because I think we'd be interested to, and I'm obviously speaking on behalf of our audience, but I'd certainly be interested to hear that.
Yeah, of course. So we do two things, and I've sort of spoken about this before on other podcasts, so we don't measure a huge amount of things in our business. Now, I don't want people to think that kind of we're just flying by the seat of our pants, like it'll all be okay. Obviously, we're looking at the sales every day, and we look at the sales every week. But in general, we are far more focused around measuring the happiness of our colleagues, and that is our sort of most important metric. So every week on a Thursday evening, when our financial week comes to an end, we do it on a Thursday because historically, when you used to have to fill out triplicate paperwork in the branches in tiny little boxes. I remember when I was working in the shops, that's what we used to have to do. We didn't want colleagues having to hang around on a Thursday evening. We'd much rather sort of let them get home hang around on a Friday evening. We'd much rather them get home or get out for dinner with their partner or whatever it is that they were going to do. And so we decided we would close the week on a Thursday. So today, when the week comes to an end, every single colleague in every single one of our branches up and down the country is asked a very simple question, and that is, how are you feeling? And they have to give a score out of 10, and they can also offer some commentary, as to why they're feeling 10 out of 10 or why they're not. And their sort of line manager, normally their area manager if they're working in a shop, is sent through that feedback and knows then that if they have any colleagues who perhaps aren't feeling an 8, a 9, or a 10 out of 10, they'll give them a call and just check in. Is there anything that we can help you with? Is there anything that that you're struggling with outside of work, at home, anything that you're worried about? Because not only is that the right thing to do to look after our colleagues, but we also know that where we've got happier colleagues, we make more money. Now, it's difficult to prove whether the colleague's happy because we're making more money, because all of our colleagues are incentivized on a bonus scheme. But we genuinely believe that the happiness piece comes first, and that will generate you more profit in the end. And then the second thing that we do, which is on an annual basis, and it's a big annual event within our business. Everybody sort of, there's a bit of a hype around it when it comes around. Normally happens in April every year, and that is something called the Happy Index. And what we do is we ask every single colleague in the business very simple question: out of 10, how would you rate the support you received from your line manager in the past 12 months? And that is that all of those scores are then compiled together. It's all anonymous, and the only person that looks at them is Goy, our director of colleagues and support, and he will go through every single one of those in order to really give each of our leaders within the business a grade as to how they performed that year. And that is, in terms of how we measure the performance of the leaders within our business, that is the most important measure, and the figures is the second most important measure. But we sort of know if we've got an area manager who's got really great figures and a poor Happy Index result, the figures are probably going to decline. And so we know we've got to turn that Happy Index around. And equally, we know if we've got an area manager with a fantastic Happy Index result and perhaps slightly poorer figures, they're probably going to be on the up. And we can help the area manager fix those things. But it's far more difficult to help an area manager fix a Happy Index. It can absolutely be done. But
that was going to be my next question, actually, because I'm fascinated by this. Like when the Happy Index doesn't give you the results that you're looking for or would aspire to have, and so you can kind of almost predict that downward trajectory in performance. What happens? What happens there? How do you kind of ensure that Happy Index can get to where you want it to be?
Yeah. So, well, there's a few different things that we do. Where we have an area manager that has just become an area manager, and perhaps they have a poor Happy Index, that they will be given a summary of the feedback that they've received from their colleagues. So they're not receiving specific this colleague in this shop, but they get a general summary. Here are the things that you need to work on. And we then ask them to write to all of their colleagues, committing to their colleagues that they will improve upon those different areas. And they then know the areas that they need to focus on. So really it's within their gift to change those things. Now, where area managers fail and are unable to turn their Happy Index results around, we tend to find it's actually our fault because we've over promoted them too quickly. So instead of sort of, exiting them or asking them to leave the business, we take an approach of stepping them back into the role that they were doing previously, and then giving them a bit more time to develop within that role before we promote them again into that area manager role. And we've done that quite successfully a number of times. We don't get it wrong every time. We don't get it right every time, believe me. But we always try to recognize that it's probably our fault if it is that an area manager is failing when they start out.
Yeah. And even that I find fascinating is that it kind of shows testament really to your culture, where you can have that open dialogue between you higher up in the chain and also those managers, that you go, okay, well, it might be that and how does that conversation go? Like where you're essentially demoting somebody, like do they find does that land well, or is that a challenge?
It never lands well. It's not a good experience for any of us, because clearly, we've made a mistake. It's not their fault. We just, sometimes it might be because of the needs of the business. We're going through a period of growth, and so, needs must, we over promote someone. And again, that really isn't their fault. But no, it's never an easy conversation. I think probably what does help it though is that they've had, they've seen that commentary, so they know the things that they need to work on, and they get a year to do that. And then if they're still receiving the same feedback and they're getting the same poor scores as to how their colleagues have rated their support, it makes it much easier. It's not coming as a surprise to them. Which I think helps.
Suppose again, having that open dialogue about how that process works is only going to help as well, because at least they know where they stand, and it's all measured. I'm fascinated by that. It's and it clearly you yourselves are learning the processes of those as well, and noticing that okay, so sometimes we don't always get it right, but that's okay. It's fine to be able to move around that and be agile with that. And yeah, I think that's fascinating, and I would love to find out more about that, but I'm conscious of time.
No problem.
This is kind of my penultimate question to you, which is, you're responsible for the Timpson direct business, which you mentioned about
Mhm.
before. So for online vending, international franchises, how do you bring the Timpson story and culture to this much less hands-on side of the business?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, yeah, this is something we sort of pondered on for quite a long time, because people are so important within our business, and again, those
Mm,
personalities are so important. And so, I was sort of lucky enough to be tasked with the bits of the business that perhaps were not so people focused. Our web businesses. So we've got a number of quite successful e-commerce businesses within our web portfolio. Our vending businesses. And as you said, our franchising, kind of all of our B2B partnerships,
mm,
where with some of those, I take, for example, our partnership with the John Lewis Partnership, whereby you can go into about 200 Waitrose shops around the country and drop off your dry cleaning with the partners working on their welcome desk, and we do the
hmm.
fulfillment at the back end. We're actually reliant on the service of their partners,
Yeah,
which is quite an interesting dynamic. So, you know, I think it's an area we're really, really focusing on. When I look specifically at the sort of the online and the vending businesses, we're doing a lot of work on how we can convey our personality to customers. That ranges from, for example, our online business, every week we sort of do a mini raffle, and we pick a customer order off the order sheet, and we give them a full refund. For
okay.
no other reason other than just to make their week, because
Right.
we really like giving stuff away for free in our shops. And again, in our vending business, it's something that we're looking to implement in the very near future. Is basically when a customer goes in, and we're not sure how to do this yet, but we're talking about a number of different ideas. One of them being having a button that says "Don't press here," and if the
Yeah.
customer does press it, we give them their transaction for free. So yeah, we're trying to convey our personality, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
And also, there's a little bit of conflict, I suppose, internal conflict, because our vending machines are in direct competition with our shops. And so, whilst we encourage competition, and myself and Sue with our photo vending, and Sid with our key vending, we're constantly battling each other. Um,
Mm,
we're also careful because we don't want to impact on our colleagues' bonus that they receive from sales in
mm.
their shop, and that's a difficult sort of line to tread at times.
Yeah. I'm curious. I'm fascinated by that as well. And of course, I guess now the mystery of the "do not press this button" is that's going to have slightly less of an impact now. That we all know what it is. But yeah, I do. But that human curiosity will always play to that. There's going to be people with some free stuff there. I remember um, we did something similar, and just to see how many on one of our internal systems, just to see how many people would press the button, where it would we made it fake the system to delete all of our records, on a on our CRM. So unfortunately, not as many people pushed the button as I was hoping, but there we are. Well, yeah, I'm fascinated by all of that, and there's been so much to learn there, and I would love to learn more and ask you loads more questions, but we just haven't got that time. So, with our last question, which is the same question we ask everybody that we interview on these podcast episodes, it's a bit more of a personal question. So, if you were to start your career from scratch, right back at the beginning, what would be the best piece of advice you would give yourself?
Yeah. It's a really interesting one, this, because I've sort of gone through my career, and I suppose at every new stage, when I've taken on a new role or more responsibility, I've looked back and gone, yeah, actually, whilst I might have been thinking I wanted this a year ago, or I was ready for it, these things have happened between that time and now that have made me way more ready to take on this new role or this additional responsibility. So I suppose my advice to myself would be kind of don't rush.
Mm,
It's okay to sort of actually enjoy the thing that you're doing now instead of always looking to the next thing and the next thing. Which is probably only I've only really developed that skill in probably the last 3 or 4 years. I think before that I was always looking to the next challenge, the next big thing.
yeah,
And so, yeah, it would be just, enjoy what you're doing now. Make sure
yeah.
that you're always learning from the experience. You're taking all of that experience in because it's only going to serve you well into the future.
Absolutely. And I usually challenge this. So you mentioned there that you kind of developed this thinking about 3 or 4 years ago. Do you live by that now then? Do you live by the don't rush mantra now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, at the moment, Roger, we've got so much on in the part of the business that I look after. I wouldn't be able to do anything new for a little while anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky enough that the part of the business that I'm looking after is our fastest growing part of the business. So it's really, really exciting. But yeah, I kind of, I used to look 3 years ahead, 5 years ahead, and now I just, I don't want to sound like a sort of 70s rock star, but I try and live in the moment a bit more, and just, really enjoy what I'm doing. Because I certainly found that previously, when I was perhaps sort of looking ahead and looking to the next thing, it actually impacts on your enjoyment of what you're doing now. You're
Yeah.
less able to sort of take in all of those experiences. And so, yeah, and it's certainly working out for me so far.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to pick up on is, and for those listening on Spotify, you won't, or other platforms, you may not be able to see this, but you're sat in front of a sign that says "Work hard and be nice to people," and that I've been looking at all the way through this conversation, and I think that that's another great mantra to live by, because it's so crucial this day and age to just to be nice to people is one thing, and working hard is part of that, and if you can do the two things together what a nice way to finish on. So, Will, thank you ever so much for giving us your time today. It's been a real genuine pleasure to talk to you today. So thank you ever so much.
Not a problem at all. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no worries. And that just leaves me to say that if you would like to find any more about Timpson, or if you'd like to connect with either of us on LinkedIn, we'll make sure we've got all the links that we've talked about in today's episode in the description of where you found today's episode. And if you've not yet already, then make sure that you go and watch or listen to our back catalogue of episodes, because there's loads more for you to go and watch and listen to there. So that just remains me to thank Will Lankston again for joining me today. And until the next time, take care.